listeners to the Dear Souls podcast with your host, Jacqueline. Today we have a special guest on our show. Her name is Jill. She's an author, journey educator, advocate for psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy, and she has an amazing story. I actually just read her book, and this book, Rescuing Jill, it is fascinating. It's amazing. I literally read it in 4 sit-downs, and I just have to say she had me super inspired, resonating with her, and just crying, tears coming out of my eyes. I just have to say, if you got to pick up this book, guys, because it's just her story is amazing. So welcome to the show, Jill.
Oh my gosh, Jacqueline. I think I'm so glad we're recording because I think I'm just going to like run that intro on repeat constantly. Thank you so much for that. I really
You're
appreciate
welcome.
it. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about yourself, Jill. Tell me about your story and how did you get to the whole MDMA, psychotherapy assisted, even mushrooms. I think you tried on that. So
Mhm.
I kind of want to know the whole story. Let me.
All right. So, the Jill in 2 minutes is that in my late 40s, I was diagnosed with PTSD due to childhood trauma. I had lived my entire adulthood in a hypervigilant state, but I was also in a very loving relationship that had regulated my nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, my partner of over 20 years had passed away, and
Mm-hmm.
about 18 months after his passing, I think my nervous system had just had enough. The widow's fog was starting to kind of dissipate, and the stress of the loss and just the unhealed trauma. And so I got a work email that, on a scale of 1 to 10, had the importance of a 1, but it triggered me. I went into a full PTSD response that I was going to lose my job, never be able to get another job, lose my house, be living in my car. I mean, just a spiral for no reason. And this went on for a couple of months. And when it wasn't getting better, even though clearly I hadn't lost my job, I went
Right.
back to my therapist who had been helping me with my grief work. I had treated myself to therapy when my partner Carl had passed away. And I went back to her. And after a couple of months of again not getting better with talk therapy, I was still absolutely sure the universe was against me. Something was right around the corner to smack me down. I was becoming more and more suicidal because I felt like I was running a race I was never going to win. Well, it turns out that she was in a program to become a psychedelic assisted psychotherapist. I was very new to drugs, so she had me go over to maps.org, MAPS.org, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. I know it's a mouthful, but they were doing the research, the psychedelic MDMA for PTSD, and about 3/4 of the people after 3 psychedelic assisted psychotherapy sessions no longer qualify for a PTSD diagnosis.
Oh,
So
wow.
I agreed to the therapy, and just like the clinical trial, to be candid, my therapy was underground, but I agreed to the therapy, and my results are the same way. It took me 3 psychedelic assisted psychotherapy sessions over the course of a year, and then I no longer qualified for a PTSD diagnosis. And that's why I advocate for this therapy that, cross your fingers and do a happy dance, should be
Oh, yeah.
FDA approved in August.
Oh my God, that would be so fascinating.
Yeah.
That'll be so cool. Oh my God, yes. Let's hope for that because I know for me going through my own mental journey, my mental health journey, it was crazy because I didn't have any of that. I didn't even think of doing any of that. And it took forever for me to even dive into wanting to do shadow work or anything because I was afraid. I didn't even know what the hell I was doing. So to have something like that, it's incredible, just to even know that, psychologists out there are willing to be open to something like that. It's promising because not everyone is willing to do something like that, especially MDMA or mushrooms. People are very skeptical about
Yeah.
it still.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely. It's still not in the nobody wanders on the maps.org website to happen to take a look at this research. You have to be
right.
directed to it or actively been searching for it. So, one of the reasons why I advocate for this therapy is that psychedelics have such a stigma. And so,
Hmm.
I hope by sharing my story that other people can say, hey, wait a minute, maybe this is a potential avenue for healing.
Yeah, yeah, that would be great. So, give me your perspective as a patient that did MDMA. How does that really like what was that journey like? How did it help with the PTSD? I know you were a little like kind of like, I don't want to, I don't know, I don't feel safe, but then you're like, fuck it, let's go for it. So, talk to me a little bit about that.
That's right. You read the book. You know all the resistance. Okay.
Oh
Okay.
yeah, I know all of them.
Yeah. And for the listeners out there, no matter what healing modality you go for, breath work, shadow work, psychedelics, regular therapy, there's always going to be a bit of resistance. And at some point we can talk
Yeah,
about that. But the
yeah.
question I get most often is what you just asked. What is it like? How does this healing work? And so the way that I explain MDMA, most people know MDMA by the street drugs, Molly or ecstasy, which
I
unfortunately
did
some
plenty of that when I was in my early teens. Oh my God, it was so much fun. It wasn't used for therapy, guys, back then because this wasn't a thing at all back in those times. Definitely, it was a good, fun drug to do and just kind of see things that were not really there, but they were there.
it makes you feel good. It makes you
Yeah.
empathetic to people. It makes you social. You want to connect with folks.
Oh, yeah.
And so
Yeah.
take all of those feelings and
Mm-hmm.
apply those calming effects, those loving effects to a person who's experiencing a physical PTSD response.
Yeah.
So what it did for me and for listeners, for folks who are just listening, I have my hands on my shoulders. Like I feel like my entire life, my shoulders were up to my ears. I was just tense. I was always ready for something. And what MDMA did in those journeys is it calmed my body down. My shoulders went back to their natural spot. And for the first time, I was able to have conversations that were terrifying to me. For instance, I was, 100% sure if my father was in the room, he was going to try to kill me.
Oh,
Those aren't conversations that you have routinely, and certainly really difficult conversations because that's what I believed. Whether it was true or not, that's what I
yeah.
believed. And so MDMA calms the body down for trauma folks enough for them to face those tough emotions and to realize, hey, wait a minute. I was afraid my father was going to kill me when I was a teenager. I'm
Hmm.
now, well, at the time I was in my late 40s. Is
Yeah.
that really true? And so you get to look at your memories and reframe them and say, oh, I understand why I may have felt that way, but that's not how it is now. And that's how the healing happens, the reframing of your attitudes, the reframing
Mm.
of your beliefs, the reframing of the memories.
Yeah, yeah, no, I get it. I understand completely. And I know from like reading your book, it was really hard for you to even like cope or understand back then before this whole therapy that your father was also at one point a child that probably went through traumas
Right.
and stuff that we don't know because you never really knew side of the family. You met your grandmother, which is his mom,
Right.
and she wasn't either,
Right.
wanting to even hear
Engage.
you
Right.
engage or nothing. And I get it, and I'm just like, oh my God, this is crazy. So that MDMA journey, the first one, kind of helped to be able to say, oh shit, maybe, my dad went through some shit,
Yeah.
and then that compassion and empathy started kind of like creeping up, and you started seeing a different side of everything.
Absolutely. It allows for compassion. My parents stopped becoming just my parents and they
Hmm.
started becoming people, people who had a full life before I came around. And the red flags of they never talked about their childhood. I didn't really
Hmm.
meet a lot of family, uh, didn't know there were red flags, didn't have any other frame of reference. And yet, looking back now, you're like, you know what? I think both of them came from really bad situations themselves.
That is crazy, man. Like, wow. I have so many questions in my head because this journey of yours has been crazy and not to have anything to reference anything to. Let me ask you something. Because
Sure.
while I was reading the book, I was like, well, the school system, the teachers, did anybody notice anything different in you or anything? Or were you always really good at just kind of like, blocking things and saying, I'm in school now, I got to do what I got to do as a kid, but I'm not going to talk about my experience at home because I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to get hit. I don't want to get, abused or whatever. So no one ever noticed anything, not even you moving from one place to the other, different schools, nothing?
So for frame of reference for folks, I mean, I was born
Hmm.
1970. So the young stuff, the constantly moving stuff, that was in the 1970s. I mean, uh, my mother couldn't even have a bank account until, late 70s, and certainly not a credit card. So it was super, super challenging just for women in
Mm,
general. I say that
yeah.
as a preface. So the idea of a child being moved around a lot um, really didn't kind of spark, because school districts don't really talk to each other. So
No.
it's not really a thing until you kind of get to high school and they start kind of really requesting records. I will
Hmm.
also say too, I was clothed. They weren't nice clothes. I was fed. I did have a roof. And so at that time, the occasional bruises from my father were well hidden when I got to like 8 to 10. They were well hidden.
Mm,
So he wasn't like punching me in the face kind of thing. He was slapping me in the face, but like the arms
mhm.
and stuff could get covered. And I'll just say that I never really trusted adults. As a child, no adult stepped in, no adult stopped any of it. And so I really just didn't trust that any adult would be able to stop it. At one point, there was a judge. My parents were going through custody stuff. And
Mhm.
in front of everybody, with my father and mother there, the judge turns to like a 6-year-old and says, "Who do you want to live with?" Like nowadays, we would never consider doing that to a child, but that's how things
Right.
were back then. I still remember a guidance counselor. I was leaving one school kind of in the middle of the year again, and a guidance counselor, hearing my story, started crying. And I'm sitting there as a child saying to myself, well, that's real helpful. Glad you can cry about it.
Oh my God. Well, what
So,
about doing something about it? Help me. Shit.
yeah, there just really wasn't. And even some things my father did later on, that it wasn't until I told my therapist about those things, in my late
Hmm.
40s, and she turned around and said, "Jill, those are reasons why child services exists, because sometimes
Yeah.
you don't realize how bad things are. That's just your life." So no,
Hmm.
it was just a different time. You didn't have
Yeah.
access to the internet. I didn't have family to talk to. I didn't know until I became an adult weird my childhood was.
You didn't have any friends in school or best friends, someone that you could confine in at all?
It just wasn't. No, I think you also have to understand too, there was a good amount of shame. I
Mm.
wasn't going to go talk to my friends that, my mother had attempted suicide multiple times, and I didn't talk to no, it wasn't. I was very good in school. Luckily, knock on wood, I was able to focus there. I'm a relatively
Okay.
social person. Not sure you can tell I'm chatty. So,
Not at
it,
all.
yeah, it just wasn't a thing.
Hmm. Yeah, I get it. I get it. You were in the 70s. I was born in 78, so I'm still in that era
Yeah,
of everything being kind of like tabooed, and me being raised with a Cuban father, very machista. I kind of get it. He wasn't very abusive like yours. He still hit me with the belt when I wasn't listening, but then I got smart one day as I got older, and I told him his last time he hit me with the belt, I'm like, do it harder. And he just stopped. It was one of those things that just popped in for me in my head, and I was like, maybe this will work, and I tried it, and he never hit me again.
yep.
But it was
Almost
that
done.
machista. Yeah, it was that, you have to do what I tell you, and you can't have a voice. And I was always very free spirit,
Right.
and my grandmother, she always allowed me to do a lot of things that fathers don't agree with, even when I got older. But it was like, what, oh my God, I'm sorry, I just, when I read your book, I felt so much for you, so much, because I don't understand how anyone can abuse their kids.
Right.
It's crazy. It's not something that shit that
Yeah.
anybody would want to go through. You know what I mean? And I just feel so much for you.
Well, thank you. Don't worry. I've gone through the therapy. I'm good with it. And
I know you are. I know you are. I've gone through my own therapy stuff too. I get it. It's so heartfelt, because it's like you never could really imagine what someone else would go through.
yeah.
And I just have those images, like I was living every single word, page, everything, every chapter. I was just living it with you there, and I was just like, holy shit. Like, why
That's
do we have to
actually
go through this shit?
I really want to thank you for that compliment because that was the goal of the book. The goal
Yeah.
was that you're in the sidecar with the healing and you get to see the good, bad, and the ugly. So thank you.
No, you're
I
welcome.
appreciate that feedback. Thank you.
Of course, you're welcome. I know you had mentioned something that some people just focus on what your father did, and I just, to me, that was like, well, okay, it's real. She went through that. It sucks ass, but I wanted to feel you, not him, not to get stuck on that story of what he did to you or your mom, trying to commit suicide. And I get it because I could relate so much to that. I tried to commit suicide so many times in my life since
Right.
I was 12, since my parents divorced, and so much. But I was like, no, I don't want to focus on that. I want to focus on Jill. I want to know what she went through. How did she experience her MDMA? And then, I know on day 3, that was amazing because they put in the mushroom. And I
Oh,
was like,
third journey. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I was like, oh my goodness, how does those two link together? How do they work together?
Yeah.
So I'm curious about that one.
Think about that. Yeah.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about that third day, and then we'll just go back and forth. And nothing has to be in order. I just kind of like it popped up for me, and I was like, I'm interested
That one.
interested to know about the MDMA and the mushrooms together.
Yeah. It's called a hippie flip. It's pretty
Ooh,
standard in psychedelic cultures. Uh,
okay.
so my first journey was September. My second journey was December. My third journey, the final journey, was May. That's how
Hmm.
much time we spent with my therapist doing the integration and talking about stuff. Like the therapy, it's super important that everybody understand that MDMA therapy is not turnkey. You do have to put the work in. You do have to spend time reframing, and life has to happen so that you can be
Hmm.
triggered so that things can come up. I mean, it's really kind of the way it works. And so
Exactly.
unfortunately for me, after the second journey, after it was kind of like this, like the integration from the second journey, healing, 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 hit a rock, and it was kind of like, ooh, going down in kind of depression because I had this nightmare of me being trapped in my childhood home. This
Hmm.
nightmare is like in March. It took us from March until May. And through visualization, I was an English major. I love visualization. I love kind of meditating and using pictures in my mind. And
Hmm.
me and my therapist, we could not get 5-year-old Jill out of the home that her mother had attempted suicide multiple times, last time with a shotgun. We could,
Oh my
the
goodness.
door to the house was not there. And what my hindsight's 2020, my subconscious was saying, you, Jill, still feel like that scared child. You're still trapped in that house.
Hmm.
So my therapist and my guide was a medical doctor. He had actually said in our preparation, look, this is clearly a mental block. Just be aware that we might use some mushrooms. And I didn't know what that meant, but at this point, I completely trusted them.
Yeah.
And so in that third journey, I would say about 2-ish hours in, uh, my doctor and guide kind of hit a roadblock where we still couldn't get me out of that house. Like they got me out of my childhood room, they got me into the kitchen, and there was still no door to the house. And
Yeah.
that's when my guide said, we're going to give you mushrooms. It was a very low dose. I now know. I didn't know anything about mushrooms at the time. It was my first time with
Hmm.
psilocybin or magic mushrooms. It was a very low dose. And with that dose, suddenly the journey changed from being very conversational. MDMA lets you hold conversations. The journey changed to me with my eye mask, probably for about an hour. And what the medicine in my system did was allow my childhood home with me in it to just kind of like break apart like a flower just blooming, or like I like to say, like a blooming onion that you get at the
Yeah.
Texas house, right? A blooming onion. It just kind of like unfolded, and the house kind of disappeared, and then I was in a garden,
Hmm.
and
I think
that
I think you mentioned something about, I think you had 3 or 4 different avatars of yourself, which I found very fascinating. And
yes,
I have never heard of so many different avatars that one person creates. I know I've had my 2 different avatars for myself.
yeah,
You know what I mean? But you created like 4, I believe, of them, and they all help throughout the journey of getting Jill out of that house. Tell me
yes,
about that.
yes. So the integration. So for the folks listening, children will very often create what my doctor likes to call an avatar. I don't know if anybody else calls it that, but that was the language that we were using. And
Hmm.
it's kind of the idea of like what you show the public. And I think everybody can resonate with that. You know, what you show at work or what you show at the public might be a little bit different than, lounging
Hmm.
around the house. So these avatars, abused children will very often create a very strong, very normal kind of avatar and do their best to live the way they think they're supposed to live. Meanwhile, on the inside, they're an abused little kid who just feels awful. So it's very helpful to think about the different ages that
Mm.
you had and kind of use them as different avatars because different ages help you do different things. And we can have a whole other conversation about, your inner child. But so my integration after that particular journey was incredibly visual. It was just beautiful.
Hmm.
My imagination was on fire. And it was multiple ages of if I remember correctly, I haven't looked at my book in a while. Me at 5, me at 7, me at 10, me as an
16.
adult. 16, oh, 16 was there too.
Hmm.
So like all of these Jills from different parts of my life kind of showing up in my imagination, helping that little 5-year-old Jill who had escaped the most terrifying house or most terrifying place she had ever lived. Because, and this is why people are kind of listening and going, ooh, this sounds a little weird. But when you think about it, our conversation earlier, I did not trust adults. I didn't trust anybody else. The only person I was going to trust was me. And
Hmm.
suddenly, the imagination of using different ages of myself really makes sense. And I did kind of question if I should put that much detail in the book because I do know that some people who haven't done psychedelic work might look at that part of the book and go, ooh, she went off the deep end. But I
That's
purposely
okay.
included it, right? I purposely included it because I think we need to normalize the use of imagination in
Mhm.
healing our subconscious. Think about how silly your dreams are sometimes. That's our subconscious, that's our imagination. Why not harness that power to heal? And so that's why I kept that in there and all the conversation about the different Jills, the
Mhm.
avatars.
I'm glad you put that in there because that was so amazing. That was actually one of my favorite parts of the book.
Oh,
Those little avatars and the whole journey of getting little Jill out of that upstairs and then downstairs and then into the garden. All that was like wow. Like I just love how you did the whole storytelling of that, and I was just like, huh, I love
yeah.
it. You
Yeah.
inspired me to actually create my own memoir in the future.
Well, that was the latter part of the book was hard to write. And so that's
Yeah.
why I kind of I would you actually see transcripts from the actual journey.
Hmm.
We always recorded our journeys.
Nice.
So there was a little tech glitch on the second one, but that's okay. But that's why I resorted to the transcripts because I think they're really powerful to show the I'm not enough, I'm too much, I'm really scared. Like it was just nobody really talks about how the subconscious works from a patient point of view. So that's why I use transcripts.
Yeah, no, and that's beautiful that you did that because it really tells your story. It's very authentic,
Yeah.
and you didn't hold back at all, which I love because some people, and you were there, I was there, we're afraid to talk about our shit. We're afraid to open up to other people. Like, what are they gonna think about us? Are they gonna think we're fucking crazy?
Right.
And I get it. Like 5 years ago, my husband and I, we actually split for a little while and I stayed in Franklin, North Carolina. He went to Colorado, and I remember having a conversation with my sister, and she's like, "Well, you need to get the hell out of there. You need to come back to Miami. I need to put you in one of those, crazy houses because you need help. You're not okay." And I remember telling her, "No, you're not gonna freaking take me to one of those places. If I go there, I'm not coming out. They're gonna fucking make me even worse than I am."
Oof.
So I am not doing that shit. Are you kidding me? Fuck no. So
That's
I refused. Yeah, I refused. And that was that. And I was on my healing journey already back then. I had no idea what the hell it looked like or what I was supposed to do. I just know that I needed to get the hell out of Florida, out of the place that caused me so much pain, So then I could start healing, and the mountains was it for me. And I thank my husband for that, because all of it was perfect. All, even our own shit that we were going through in our relationship was perfect. All of it, it was perfect. But
Mhm.
I was like, hell no. I mean, it's hard. It's really, really hard to just open up to someone and then be like, oh, I love you. Like, I'm here for you and comfort you, versus you need to go to a fucking crazy house, or you need to go on pills, or you need to go see a psychiatrist or somebody,
Right.
and I was just like, no, I'm going to heal myself. Screw this.
For you. Good for you. Good for
So
you.
I get it. That's why I was like, I could resonate so much with you, because I'm like, my goodness, and she's telling her story, and I'm like right here with her. I get it all. It's like, Jesus, thanks for that. But I love this whole conversation. But
Yep.
yeah, your journey it's very, very inspiring, and I really hope that the audience just has an open mind, open your consciousness, open the awareness of wanting to get curious with, just if it's not MDMA, whatever that is for you. Like, I didn't do MDMA or any kind of psychedelics. For me, it was cannabis. That was my best friend for the last 6 years.
Yeah.
It helped me sleep at night, because I couldn't sleep. I couldn't stop my head from all the time. I got a very chattery head.
Yep.
So that helped, a lot. It helped with the pains in my body, and I did most of the work myself, because I just,
Mhm.
again, didn't trust that a psychologist would help me. I didn't
Yep.
trust that. I didn't think that they knew, excuse me, that they knew how to really help me, because I felt like there was more. There was something outside of this reality, this programming, this matrix that we live in. I felt
Mhm.
like there was something else that was going to help me, not a human being.
Right.
So
Right.
I kind of did a lot of it on my own, and a lot of, like, like Reiki, a lot of acupuncture,
Mhm.
QHHT sessions, which is, doing hypnotherapy. You going back into your past lives and kind of figuring shit out. So I kind of went down in those, holistic modalities. So it's
Yeah.
kind of like MDMA is kind of the same thing, the psychedelic, but it's, a little different. But it was kind of cool. It's been fun, and I think it's taken me roughly around your time. You took about 18 months.
It was about a year. It was about a solid year to actually no longer qualify for a PTSD diagnosis. I
Right.
continued therapy though,
Okay.
because I always say that I healed the capital T traumas
Mm,
that were making me suicidal, but I had a life very similar to yours. I had a lifetime of kind of neglect and abuse that needed
mhm.
more time to work out. So I didn't stop my therapy work. I
Good.
continued journeys with those two people. And I also do a lot of psychedelic tourism to understand how different psychedelics work with trauma.
Mm,
So I've been in it. I've been really, my therapist likes to comment that I just keep unwrapping the layers and I just keep chipping away. And it's really been amazing. And I never would have made, like cannabis is a great example, like talk therapy to me
mhm.
is the speed of like the horse and buggy on a little country road.
Yeah.
MDMA, cannabis, definitely like a zippy car on the highway. You're just going
Yeah.
to get there a lot faster.
Yeah, you will definitely. Yeah, I actually in one of my other podcasts, I actually interview a guy that did ayahuasca,
Uh-huh.
and he went through another crazy, life with his mom and father, kind of like almost the same,
Yeah.
and he said that ayahuasca was his friend. That's what helped him, heal himself. And now
Yeah.
he has a sanctuary in Maine, and it's just fascinating that he's helping other people too. And this is
Yep.
what it's about. We go through our shit, we do the work, because it's fucking work and it's every day. I call it the shadow work. And then, you come out on the other side of the light, from the darkness. Oh, you always come out through the light, I say. And then you inspire and help other people. So
Hmm.
I love that.
Yeah. It's part of it. I did feel very privileged to have access to this therapy, especially since it was underground and still kind of in clinical trials. And so I thought,
Hmm.
how selfish would I be? And I'm in a time of my life where I can take time to do this, which I'm so privileged to do. And so how selfish would it be if I didn't advocate so that other people could at least know about or maybe in some way help move it forward? So that's why I'm here
Yeah.
talking.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. And I love that. I love that you're doing this. And I'm so glad that, you reached out to me, because, I had just gotten on that matchmaker.fm app,
Yep.
for podcasters and guests, and you reached out, and I was like, oh, and I read your story. I was like, yes, I want her on this show. Are you kidding me? I'm like, this is what it's about.
Yes, pleasure. This is lovely.
Yeah. But okay, so now tell me about how the MDMA and the mushrooms were, as like how they I guess the dosage of it, like on the first round, second, and then third, like what were those dosages that you got and how long did it last?
So I don't share my dosage. What I tell people, because
Mhm.
I'm not a doctor. What I tell
Right.
people with MDMA is a medical dose is not more than 200 milligrams,
Okay.
mgs, 200. Like, don't go over that. Now, if you go on Reddit, you're going to hear crazy stories of people doing crazy amounts. MDMA is a serious drug, the same way that any other medical procedure is a serious
Mm-hmm.
drug, and you don't want to blow out your serotonin. You don't want to cause yourself. MDMA releases a bunch of serotonin, and this is
Okay.
like the most non-clinical explanation you'll ever get because I'm not a doctor. And
Okay.
so it's kind of natural to have a little bit of an MDMA hangover for 2 or 3 days where you might not feel that great.
Mm-hmm.
Supplements can really help with that feeling, but you want to be super careful with your dosage to not go over that number because you really can just blow out your serotonin and potentially cause trouble. So don't go on Reddit looking for dosage advice from some thrill seekers is my
Okay.
advice. In terms of mushrooms, I now know that I had probably at most a gram.
Okay.
I did not know that then. It was my first time with mushrooms. And I'll say the same thing. Dosage matters. The same way you would not go take 10 painkillers when you're only supposed to take one. You know,
Mm-hmm.
magic mushrooms, you can have a lovely walk in the park with 1 gram. You can have a beautiful moving experience with two. You start to get a little incapacitated around three, probably. And I'm talking generalizations. I guarantee you're going to have people arguing with me. No, I'm able to do 10 grams. I'm just doing general. For
Yeah.
most people, 5 grams, depending on the strain of mushroom, is like a heroic dose that people use
Yeah.
to heal their alcoholism. It really kind of takes you out. It was nothing. My therapy didn't need that. I had MDMA in my body. I trusted the people with whom I was working. I just needed to be able to release that kind of stuckness of that trauma. And
Mm-hmm.
so that small dose of psilocybin is what helped. And by the way, people out there, like maps.org is great for MDMA therapy for PTSD. If you are looking at a depression diagnosis, go
Mm-hmm.
look at Johns Hopkins University's research about psilocybin magic mushrooms because they're doing a lot of that work.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
Now, how do people, if they were interested in wanting to find a psychologist, a guide, like where do they go search for these people? Because it's not everybody does it,
Right.
so like where did you go and search that you came across that amazing, psychologist and guide that were up for this journey with you, so if you want to tell the audience where you went for that.
Oh, no, I just fell into it. It just happened to be my
Oh,
therapist. Yeah, no, I
okay.
totally fell into it. She was working towards her program. And when I had gone to her for my grief work, I had no idea she was doing any of that.
Mm,
This didn't come about until the PTSD thing. And so
right.
what I'll say to folks is that we all have to cross our fingers and do a happy dance because the FDA is supposed to approve MDMA therapy August 11th. I say supposed to. There's been a little bit of static. There's been some drama going on right now. If you go on LinkedIn and search MDMA therapy, you're going to see a lot of veterans groups who are now actively speaking up because this
Good.
will, if it doesn't get approved by the FDA, which it should, it had breakthrough
It
therapy
should.
designation.
It should.
Um, a lot of veterans organizations will be very upset. So there's a lot of PR going on right now. So I say all that because right now the
Mhm.
treatment is all underground. On my
Good.
website, thejourneysage.com, I do have a couple of links to take you to psychedelic practitioners, most of whom are working with ketamine right now and are getting
Mhm.
ready for MDMA. They might be able to lead you to either themselves or somebody else. Just be aware that it is still an underground thing right now. If the FDA approves, the DEA is going to take a couple of months to reschedule MDMA. and you're not going to be able to go get like a script and go to the pharmacy. You're going to have to go to a facility because a journey is like 6 to 8 hours. And so I wouldn't anticipate this therapy really being available until 2025 above ground, because it's going to require a lot of infrastructure. Um,
Right.
so I would say to folks, go check out some of the resources I have on my website. It'll get you in community. You can also start looking around at different, believe it or not, meetup.org, meetup.com, meetup.org, the meetup site has
Yep.
a bunch of psychedelic communities. And if you are serious, you can even go on Reddit. There's a bunch of psychedelic communities. And if you're seriously looking for therapy, you can wade through some of the silliness that's on there and actually connect
Right.
with folks who can lead you to those folks.
That's awesome. That's really good to know.
Yeah.
I wanted to dive a little bit deep about your story, just a little bit, if you're comfortable. When I was reading your book, I know you mentioned you Carl a few times, and I wanted to kind of know more about that love story, because I know that from you going through so much shit, in your childhood, and even when you were in college and going back between your mom and your dad's house and all that, Carl come in. Where did you meet him? How was this love story? Like, how did it happen? Like, I'm so
Uh-huh.
curious to hear that, because I'm such a love story freakazoid. I just love like the Notebook and all that awesome stuff. But I really wanted to know a little bit like about Jill and her love story with Carl. And then I know you have someone new in your life, but that I just kind of like, I know that was 20 years of amazing, beautiful, just kind of like you had somebody that really be there for you and be your support system and be that love and that compassion and that strength for you.
Yeah.
So I just kind of want to hear a little bit about that.
Well, it's that relationship is very precious to me. I actually keep that out of the
Okay.
conversation. So what I say about that though is that, there's research out there. So I taught high school English for 10 years. And there's a lot of research that all a kid needs is one person in their life that
Hmm.
shows love and compassion and things of that sort. And, as in my adulthood, Carl was that one person. He was constantly supportive. I knew he loved me. He was also much more grounded than I was. He
Mm.
loved to say, stop throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I now know it was
I
trauma.
love that saying.
Yeah, I was living with a bunch of anxiety. I was doing it, but we definitely kind of counteracted each other.
Mm.
And it might have been the first time that I actually felt, I shouldn't say might, it was the first time I felt unconditional love. And so
Mhm.
losing him was devastating. I mean, it
Yeah.
really did. It was, I think from the book, there was a lot of cursing in that first chapter.
Yeah, there was. Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of it. I was like, oh yeah, she felt that. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Losing him was pretty, because to be candid, I never thought, I'm sure my parents loved me to the capacity they were able to. That
Yeah,
does not felt that does not mean that I actually felt that they loved me. And a lot of times I
exactly.
know they didn't like me. So to have that presence in my life, I'm incredibly indebted to the universe for allowing that to happen. And I'm actually single right now. The my boyfriend that you got to know a little bit in the book, he and I
Hmm.
are best friends, but we've kind of parted ways. So it's an interesting time in my life to I've been single since October, and I've just kind of like learned what it's like to be single, and it's kind of awesome.
Yeah, yeah. It's fun.
Fun. It's a really interesting. You learn a lot about yourself. I continue. You never stop learning, and that Carl relationship really kind of solidified. Life really can be happy. People can
Yeah.
be loving and kind. But yeah, I kind of keep a lot of that because hey, you got a lot of information about my life in the book.
No, I know. I could just put little together stuff together, and then because I could relate so much. I mean, I went through a lot of shit with my husband, and I think we had to because we both came from backgrounds of
Mhm.
trauma and going through stuff, and he was not my first choice. I have been through a lot of relationships, a couple of marriages, and just always
Oh,
trying to find love. And I was the victim. Everything was always happening to me, and I would just pack up a U-Haul and get the fuck out in a year or two, and shit wasn't working out for me anymore. I had no patience. Like I was so bad. And now I look back and I understand why
right.
all of that. And it's funny because what came forth for me not long ago was I've always had abandonment issues. And I'm
Sure.
sure you went through that. And I never understood why men, I felt like they were not honest, they cheated, they betrayed me and stuff like that. And then my father did a beautiful thing, and him and I have had our ups and downs. We've gone through years of not speaking. Now I finally, what was it, 2 years ago? I told my husband, if I'm going to have a good relationship with you, I have to forgive my father. Because if not, that's not going to happen. That's huge. So I
That's
did. It's huge. So I forgave him, just called him one day and said, hi, I love you. And went from there. I never brought up the past again. I don't give a shit what happened in the past.
right.
I don't bring it up. We move from that moment forward. That's all we know. That's it. And it's not like we're on the phone all the time, but I'm able to, have a decent relationship, have him in my life somehow. But
Yeah.
he said something beautiful to me that just kind of like, whoa, set me free. And it was that he was like, I abandoned you the day you were born. And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, yeah, the day that you were born, like while your mom was pregnant with you, we were supposed to have twins. And I always wanted boys. I wanted a boy first because I wanted to be able to do things with a boy. It's that machista, think way of thinking. And he said, when you were born, I saw a girl, and I was just so disappointed. And yeah, I know. And, he's like, I abandoned you, but I came back the next day because I could not leave you. Something in me just couldn't leave you. And I was like, oh, and he's like, I'm so sorry. I said, no, don't tell me you're sorry. Thank you. And he was like shocked. He's like, what do you mean, thank you? And I said, because all my life I've been wondering why I have felt abandoned. Why do I have bad relationships with men? Why do I go through all the shit that I go through? Why can't I be in a stable relationship?
Right.
And it has to do because you abandoned me when I first was born. Then
Yep.
you abandoned me when you divorced my mother and you went with another woman and her daughter, and that her daughter became your daughter more than me. So, all these things that I look at, then I look at my abandonment from when I got pregnant at 16 from my
Yep.
son's father. So it's been so many abandonment from men, So for me, it was so precious when he was able to tell me, I abandoned you. And I was like, oh shit, you just kind of like, I was looking for answers in my shadow work, and boom,
Boom.
without me even asking you directly, somehow the universe said, she needs to hear this now.
It's a
And
piece.
audience out
Yep.
there, yeah, yeah. And this is for the audience too. This is like, if you have ever gone through anything with your father, your mother, any family member, and they come forth and they tell you something, whatever that is, as hard as it is to hear it, thank them,
Yeah.
because that is part of your freedom. That
Yeah.
is part of you releasing all that shit, and being able to move forward and be happy.
Yeah.
So that's why I was like, when you went through your experiences and you had to go through the MDMA to kind of be able to see your parents in a different light, to me, I was so happy for you because I get it. I went through the same shit. Like I used to fight with my mom and my dad all the time. And, I would tell people my mom did this, my mom did this to me, my father did this to me.
Yeah.
And now I look back and I'm like, shit, they were just people. They went through their own shit. You know what I mean? Like we're all human beings on this freaking journey, trying to do the best we can with what we have,
Yep.
and we all go through things, we're none of us are perfect,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I want to validate, because people, this is a different way of thinking about trauma. I want
Hmm.
to validate that newborn's feelings. That newborn picked up on that energy. That
Yes.
newborn obviously couldn't communicate, but somewhere that got internalized. And in the Western society in which we live, we don't
Hmm.
really get that. We don't really understand that children understand energy.
Of
And so
course.
I wanted to really validate that for you, because I know there's some people who'd be
Thank
like,
you.
what are you talking about? She was a baby. She wouldn't remember that. The trauma in your system, that
Hmm.
you knew there was some sort of weird emotion there, And
Mm-hmm.
your system held on to that. So I just wanted to normalize that. I wanted to validate it, number one, and normalize it.
No, thank you for that, because it's funny that all this conversation has come into this beautiful loop of information. And I'm going to have another lady on the show that talks about the birth, like when you're in the mother's womb up to
Mhm.
like about 3 months, that child picks up on everything,
Everything.
everything. So if you were pregnant and you were going through stress, you were going through getting beat up or raped or whatever that is, that child, that baby, it's already having those energy signatures within them. And then when they're born, yeah, even the trauma of coming out through the birth canal, that's traumatizing. That's a
Yep.
different kind of trauma. And I also found out that if you have a C-section, that's a different kind of trauma that could cause problems in the future as in their adult lives, even in business and everything. And I was like, how
Yep.
freaking fascinating that now there's so much more research that people are doing based on their own journeys of shit that they've gone through. And, it makes total fucking sense why sometimes we're so fucking screwed up and we don't know why.
We
Well,
don't know why. We can't identify because it happened to us before we were verbal.
yeah,
The
yeah,
nonverbal trauma is some of the toughest to get to because you can't put words to it. So,
yeah.
yeah, beautiful. I can't wait to listen to that interview. That'll be very cool.
Yeah, it'll be pretty cool. And eventually, I think I want to kind of do like a show where we're going to have a few women talking about, mental health and traumas and the things that they have uncovered, and do like a little kind of like maybe like a coaching or a seminar or something small,
Yeah.
because I'm seeing where this is going. I'm seeing where all this with the podcast that I'm doing and the intentions and all that. I'm like, okay, I'm listening. I'm listening to my guides, not your guides, not the ones that you had in real human form. But my spirit guides are like, you need to, number one, write on a memoir, because I already wrote a book. It's right up
Nice.
there.
Nice.
And then you have to coach, and and then bring women together like a women's group or something. So all this is happening, and we're all connecting for a reason, and I'm so really psyched about it. Like, I'm so happy,
Yeah.
to be able to connect with beautiful people like yourself.
It'll be lovely. It's a
It
wonderful
will.
You go for it. You go, girl.
We go, girl. So,
Very,
so you talked about, the assisted MDMA therapy. You talked
yep.
about the FDA approval, which might be coming out in August. Cross our
Yep.
fingers for that.
Yep.
And then we, touched a little bit on your childhood trauma, but I do want to go back a little bit just to, how did you get little Jill out of that house? Because that little part of the story, I know you went through upstairs, then to the kitchen little table, and then kind of like everything just kind of like broke down. It became like dark, and then you went into a garden. But I think, I don't know, that's my favorite part of the story. I just want a little more, like, if you could go step by step of how that happened and the names of the different avatars, maybe. If
Oh
you
my
could.
gosh. You're newer to the book than I am. I don't know if I remember. Are you talking about the actual mushroom part and what I experienced with the house cleaning part, or are you talking about when I managed to walk out into the driveway?
When you managed to
Driveway.
walk out, yeah. So if
Okay.
you could give us like a little bit, like,
Okay.
okay, little Jill was upstairs in the room, then we got her down here. Like, give me those little.
Okay. Here's how I remember it. Clearly, I need to reread my book.
It's okay. I
Um,
go through the same shit with my book. I don't remember half of the shit I wrote on there.
That's one of the reasons I wrote it too. Right. One of the things, so that journey ended, and the time period after a journey is called integration, the days, weeks, and months after. Think of it like physical therapy. You have to kind of do something. And I remember very distinctly, it might have been the day after, or it was at least 2 days, but probably the day after, I was out walking. I'm a walking meditator. I'm not a
With
with Sadie, my little girl. Yeah, she just passed away in December.
Oh no,
Really
oh,
long time.
sorry.
Yeah.
Oh
So no, that dog was spoiled rotten. She's good. She's good. She's hanging
yeah,
out with Carl. It's all right.
I know. I'm sure.
So what I was a little confused about was I was walking and I started to have this imagery of being in the house. And I remember kind of actively thinking, whoa, what's going on? I thought I got out of the house. But then I also said, wait a minute, this is integration. You wherever your imagination is going, just go with it. Don't
Right,
fight this. And that's what
right,
happened. I was walking and I had this image of me. It's super important to understand too that the avatar of me stuck in my childhood home was of a very malnourished little girl. Think of a 5-year-old that really looked like a 3-year-old. I was super skinny. My hair was real stringy. I was not the height I should be. But the avatar of Jill at that age was full rosy cheeks, healthy, what you would show to the world. And I think you might have to correct me because you've read it. I'm pretty sure that Avatar 5-year-old and malnourished 5-year-old walked out the door.
Yeah.
Okay. We walked out the door of that house and we managed to get to the driveway. And what I thought was interesting, adult Jill stood back. I think 10-year-old Jill was there,
Yes.
16-year-old might have been. But at that point, different ages kind of started helping out little Jill, little malnourished Jill in the driveway. And as I was walking, I was like, okay, why are we hanging out at the driveway? This is kind of silly. What's the deal? And it was basically, you have to remember you're dealing with a 5-year-old. You're not
Hmm.
dealing with an adult. You're dealing with a 5-year-old. She has just gotten out of the most scary spot.
Hmm.
She does not know the world. Let her hang out in the driveway a little bit. And so
Right.
I continue walking. I'm using my imagination. The other Jills are kind of, I was a roller skater, sidewalk chalk kind of kid. That was the
Me too.
game right. I think we all were, right?
I think we were. Yeah.
That's the game we were playing. Spirit was all kind of around. Carl was there. Like it was very much almost like if a kid just got out of the ocean, you wouldn't immediately run that kid to the car. You would put that kid kind of in a towel and let them warm up. That's what that driveway was. It was kind of like
Right.
getting out of this house. And then my imagination went really crazy. And at one point, I was flying over the house. One point, adult Jill was showing little malnourished Jill the ocean. Like it really is, reading that chapter is a real validation to let your imagination go and heal because it's your subconscious kind of
Yeah.
reconnecting. And that entire summer, that little 5-year-old malnourished Jill, she hung out with me. So that journey was in May. And she hung out with me. I told a story in the book of going food shopping. So
Hmm.
malnourished Jill is, in my mind, she's getting fed, she's growing up, she's wearing cute little glittery clothes, she's got her ponytail, like
Hmm.
she's cool. She's she's growing up, she's cool.
Yeah.
But my mother had a terrible experience. My mother actually did try to leave my father a few times. And I mean, she really, one of the reasons for all the suicides was trying to escape my father. But
Yeah.
we actually tried to leave and we were at probably a Kmart and her card got declined. He had figured out that she
Mm.
was leaving and he had stopped the credit card.
Yeah.
And so think about my mother with a 4 or 5-year-old. I don't remember exactly what age I was.
Hmm.
She knew that he then knew she was trying to get away and she had
Oh God.
no choice. She had to go back to him. All I remember was that there was no money and we had to go back to a dangerous situation. That's all I knew. So 40 some year old Jill is at the supermarket, and I become very much aware that like 5-year old Jill is kind of hanging out. Again, imagination. This is not schizophrenia. This is not hallucinations. This is just your imagination and your subconscious working. And so that little 5-year old Jill, psychologists would actually, or psychiatrists would say that little child was not integrated into the adult. That's how they would kind of phrase that. I didn't know that language then. But I'm telling you, I was just very aware she was there. I paid for the groceries and I felt this immediate sense of relief. And she kind of like skipped next to me, going to the car, disappeared when I had to pack the car up because she was
Of
5.
course. She's not going to help.
Help. But it was the beginning of her actually seeing an adult being competent, an adult woman being competent, and eventually the interaction, the integration, she actually kind of morphed into me, which is what they
Mhm.
say, like you kind of integrated your inner child. My little 5-year old knew that she had an adult right here that would take care of her, that she could trust. And so it's a fascinating, it really is just a fascinating way to heal mental health injuries. I don't say mental health illnesses. I say a mental health injury, healing the inner child. And for me, being a very visual experience, not everybody will experience it that way. I was an English major. I like that stuff.
Yeah, no, I get it. I'm a visual person. I always tell my husband I'm very visual. I have to see it. And even with me, like now going through all my stuff, I've come into different gifts and they're starting to open up more. And, my senses and, I could connect with spirit and I could do so many cool stuff now. But it's helped. It's helped that little girl that felt abandoned, that felt betrayed, that felt, like really the only person that she had that understood her was her grandparents and her uncle that passed away already. They're all gone. My elders are gone. And it was the hardest thing, to not have them here because they were my everything,
Yeah.
So I get it. And I think it's fascinating how we can visualize
Yeah.
our own child, our own inner child, and then,
Yeah.
help them heal so they could integrate and we could become one. And now we come into our powers as adults, as feminine,
Yeah.
as women in this earth, and it's just so beautiful to be able to get to this point in our lives. And it doesn't matter if you're 20, 30, 40, 50, it doesn't matter what age, do
No.
the work, do it. It's worth it. I mean, the freedom that you feel, to be able to have passion for life again,
Yes.
to be able to
Really.
see things differently and to have fun and not be so scared because that's why in my emails I call myself fearless goddess because I've had to overcome so many fears and I
Yeah.
keep overcoming them. Just dare to dream again, dare to like want to do the work because it's so worth it. Don't allow the programming of this world, what we've been exposed to kind of fuck up yourself completely. Like, you only live this timeline, you live it one time. So we got to make the best out of it. I don't care how fucked up it was. We have a choice.
Yeah.
We do have a fucking choice now, you know?
You don't have to. One thing that psychedelics has allowed me to do, and I think I'm from hearing your story, I'm thinking the same thing with cannabis and your breath and your
Mm,
shadow work, is that the stories we were fed, the societal stories, the family
mm,
stories, the gender stories, or the beliefs that we had, like I don't really
mm-hmm.
think of them as beliefs anymore. They're simply stories. And
Yeah.
it's our perception of the world. And those things can be shifted. And it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
until that first MDMA journey that it was kind of the lightning bulb of, wait a minute, I can think about things differently. I just
Mm-hmm.
never had that before. And that's kind of the crux of healing.
You never knew that you had the permission to do so.
The ability, the permission, like to me, this is just how life was. And I think that's how
Yeah.
most of us live, unless we're lucky enough to come across experiences or people that can show us different ways. For me, it took
Mm-hmm.
until my late 40s, but most people are walking around saying, this is what it is.
Yeah.
I'm looking around going, wait a minute, that I'm not enough, that's a story. That belief in
Right.
XYZ, that's a story. You have a choice to change those stories. And psychedelics, for me, makes it like the super highway to get it done.
That's beautiful. Now, are you thinking to do any more MDMA, any other like ayahuasca maybe in the future? Go maybe to Costa Rica. I know they have a
Yeah.
place where they call Reunion
Yep.
that you do the ayahuasca retreat, and I'm dying to do something like that
Yeah.
eventually. But you're thinking of doing that too?
So I love psychedelic retreats, psychedelic tourism, because I like understanding how the different psychedelics work with trauma.
Mm,
MDMA works very differently than Bufo. Bufo works very differently than Iboga. I've also done some Cambo, some other stuff.
mm,
I'm thinking there's a retreat in probably the Maryland area, like
okay.
somewhere that hopefully by the end of the summer I will be able to try working with Mother Aya because I hear she's lovely. Because
Oh,
Iboga is kind of like the grandfather and
yeah,
Aya
yeah,
is
yeah,
the grandmother. Um,
yeah,
and I'm just always fascinated because I think I think it's really important to not get medicine blindness. You'll get a lot of people who have only worked with ketamine or people who've only
yeah,
worked with psilocybin, magic mushrooms, and not every there's a key for every door.
yeah.
And so you'll hear veterans say, I was completely healed of my PTSD after like 2 Bufo journeys. Having done Bufo, I totally get it. If you had this
Right.
one big experience at war that you
Hmm.
needed to resolve, Bufo is great.
Wow.
If you had years, or if you're in an emotional, my last MDMA journey was last October. I was having some flashbacks to Carl's passing. Like if
Hmm.
your body is upset, calm it down with MDMA, but don't go into an iboga journey, because iboga is like hardcore 24-hour, 36-hour
Holy
journey.
shit.
that, like like it's not for beginners, it's not for somebody who's on the edge. So there's different
Right.
medicines for different things, and I fully enjoy learning how they can all work, because honestly, I get those questions all the time. Well, Jill,
Yeah.
my cousin is going through this, what would be good? So
Hmm. That's fascinating. Yeah, I'm open to all that, and in the hopefully in the near future, I'll get to try, ayahuasca. That's one of my next ones that I would love to do because I actually have some mushrooms that I tried. I think it was last year with my husband. He was like, "Oh, let's just try it. Let's just do it," and I was like, "Okay." And I had done it, another time, another 2 times before. The first time was pretty, it was in my 20s, and it was fun. It was just fun.
yeah,
It wasn't for anything else,
that's
but just
okay.
fun. Yeah, that's fine.
Recreations are okay. Yes.
Yeah, that's fine. But now I've created this whole, like, I have this love and respect for the plant medicine because they're just amazing. They're I mean, universe, God, source gave us these plants for us to be able to do these kind of things, to heal ourselves from all the shit we go through. But like, the experience that I had with the mushrooms and my husband, it was just so weird. And the first, I think, hour, it was awesome because we were laughing. We went outside. We were touching the tree and just connecting with the energies of the tree and nature. And then we came back in, and then we are trying to connect, and we were just having such a hard time connecting with each other because of what the traumas that we both have gone through in our past and during our relationship. And then finally, like, I think it was like the last 2 hours of it, I was just like, get me out of this, I don't want to be like this anymore. It just became very frustrating for me, but it's because I didn't have I think I didn't have that mental capacity and the guides that I needed, the assistance that I needed to go
I
through that
Yeah,
moment.
yeah.
And that's why now, my husband just did a little bit not long ago. And, he just sat down and started writing, like journaling,
Mhm.
and reading. And I'm like, okay, that was kind of weird for me to see that. And I'm like, oh no, I'm not doing that. I'm not ready for it, because I was doing a lot of shadow work and I was afraid of something. I wasn't sure what.
Ah,
And now that I've done more of that shadow work, now that I've freed myself more, that I feel safe, now I'm like, okay, I'm ready.
oh, you
But I
can.
wanted to be assisted. I wanted to do it with like shamans or just kind of like in a place where it's for that, that everything's been created for you to be just chill, safe, you know. That's what I want to experience next. When you say that I think Maryland, when is it? October?
I haven't gotten the flyer yet. I think it's the end of August. I think it's a
Well,
women's retreat at the end of August, but I don't have the specifics yet because I haven't gotten the.
send me that. When you have that information, send it to me.
Oh my
Because
gosh.
I'm,
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Okay.
No, please send it to me because maybe I could meet you there and we could have that journey, together and, us women. Because I think I told my husband I kind of want to do these things on my own because I was always so codependent about everything and everyone in my life. And I've just learned to just be okay with myself
Yeah.
and have my own space and my own time, which I never knew how to have my own space.
Right.
So now it's like, I just want to go do stuff on my own. And he's looking at me, but we do everything together. And I'm like, I need to do stuff on my own.
Yeah. Sometimes inner work. I'll also keep an
Hmm.
eye out if I see anything in your particular area that comes across the group, because this group is a nationwide group that
Oh,
posts.
beautiful.
If something comes along in your area, I'll send it down to you.
Yeah, let me know because we're right in the corridor of where South Carolina, North Carolina, and Georgia meet. Even Alabama is not that far from here. So, Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina. So
To
anywhere
me,
in
you're
those
in the middle.
areas. I'm ready. I'm in the middle of everything. I'm like
You're
monkey
really
in the
not,
middle.
but like to me,
Yeah.
girl, you're in the middle. Yeah, I'll keep an eye out. Yeah.
Thank you. That's awesome. I appreciate that.
There is quite a bit of research around MDMA with couples too.
Hmm.
More and more research is being done there, which I think will be super interesting. I just read the book Ecstasy as Medicine Jonathan something. He's getting kind of hammered because he likes to brag a little too much, but he has
Okay.
talked a bit about MDMA for couple, like a lower dose MDMA,
Mm-hmm.
and what it just allows couples to kind of open up. So that's a bit of, if you want to pursue that at some point. But
Actually, that's actually a good thing because we're my husband and I, we've done so much work, individually and together, and just this year alone, our relationship has gotten so much better.
oh,
And I know that it has a lot to do with me doing my work and
yeah,
him doing his work and me really diving deep into healing my mental health.
yeah,
And that has showed him like, wait a second, if she's done it, because I was fucked up. I mean, I was on the verge of schizophrenia and
yeah,
committing suicide
yeah.
not long ago. And especially after my grandmother died, I became very, very ill, different health challenges
Did you
and
say
stuff that
schizophrenia?
I was at the verge of schizophrenia. Yeah.
Do you have a clinical diagnosis of schizophrenia?
No, no. I had an old friend of mine that he's a veteran and he was a psychologist. And he was actually helping me with the construction here in the house. And we sat down a lot. He was the one that put me in front of a mirror and told me, look at yourself. And I was like, I couldn't look at myself in a mirror. Like
Okay.
I couldn't make that eye contact with myself. That's how bad it was for me,
Okay. Something that,
yeah, yeah,
so I just want to say to the audience,
yeah,
schizophrenia running in your family is actually a warning about not to do psychedelics. But I know you've already done cannabis.
yeah,
But let's
yeah.
use this as a learning experience that any sort of psychosis or schizophrenia can be triggered by psychedelic work. And so you should be
Hmm.
screened for that before you do that work. So that was actually a really good segue that you just mentioned.
Good, good. Yeah, because not everybody, not everybody can do this work.
Right.
Or if they do, it has to
Right.
be really assisted. It has to be like, you have to go in very slowly. But, I believe that you have to do your shadow work, your inner child work, heal a lot of that before you dive into any MDMA, ayahuasca, or anything like that. So it doesn't take you into a worse place because it can. And if you don't have the emotional intelligence to decipher and kind of like know, okay, this is that experience and that this is reality,
Right.
and how do they work together,
Yeah.
you need to have some sort of mental clarity. You got to.
Absolutely. I took, from the time that I decided that I said yes to this therapy, it was
Hmm.
the spring. It took us 4 months, four
Wow.
months of prep work, talking weekly therapist sessions to get me ready for that first journey. So I want to really
Wow.
appreciate what you just said. You really need to
Mm.
know why you're there, what you're there for. Make sure you're screened. I don't have schizophrenia in my family. I don't have a heart issue. MDMA is a stimulant. Because
Hmm.
if we would have like picked the next weekend after I said yes, like I wouldn't have even known what to even work on. I wouldn't have even
Exactly.
had intentions. So yeah, that was really wise
So
what you just said.
awesome. So definitely do your research before you do anything. And I did notice that you did do a lot of journaling and in this process, which I've done it on and off. I've always had an issue with journaling myself, not an issue, a challenge, because as a child, my dad found my diary and I guess he read it and didn't like what I had in the diary.
Yeah,
So he made it like it was the worst thing on earth. And that kind of got me disconnected from wanting to put my thoughts onto paper. So
sure,
like that nobody could see it. So everything I always kept in here. And I think that's what caused a lot of my, mental health challenges.
sure.
So
Release
yeah.
those emotions. Yeah,
So
yeah.
now journaling, I'm little by little seeing myself, journaling a little more, getting more comfortable with it. And it's funny, I get woken up at 2 or 4 o'clock in the morning to journal.
That's
It hasn't happened in a while, but it has.
my God. The savings, but that's when I turn on the little microphone and I just speak to it because like I'm just not going to be able to type at that point. But yes, absolutely.
Shit, yeah, no, for me, I have to type it because my husband, well, even though my husband would sleep through a freaking tornado, doesn't hear anything. I used to get up so many times at night, and he's like, "You got up again?" And I'm like, "Yeah." They keep waking me up, and he's like, "Who's they?" And I'm like, "My guides, my spirit guides, my ancestors." They're like, "Wake up, you gotta write," And I'm like, "Really?" At 2 in the morning?
In the
The
morning.
fuck?
Right. Right. Yeah.
But it's the best time. Everything is quiet. Everything comes out. So it's kind of cool. So whatever that time is for you, just journal. It helps.
I was an English major. For me, it was the best way. And the healing happens so quickly with MDMA that you can even
Mm-hmm.
kind of forget. Like even when I would take the dog for a walk, I
Mm-hmm.
might feel 2 or 3 memories, and by the time I get home, not even kind of remember which ones they were. So I just tried to
Yeah,
journal and capture as much as I could.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I want to say thank you. Thank you for your work. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being on here.
Yeah.
And, I just love your story, love your energy, and just so happy that you've been able to find your freedom
Yeah.
and to really be happy in this world, because this world is not bad. We make it bad. This world is beautiful and we come here to experience life, and that's all it is. Everything in life is an experience. That's
Yeah.
it.
You get to
That's
choose
it.
what stories you listen to.
Yep. Yep. So what I want to do now that we're at the end of the show, and
Uh-huh.
this is something that I'm starting to do, and I'm doing it with you for the first time. I
Okay.
want to ask you closing questions, 3 of them.
All right.
And the first one is, what message or piece of advice would you like to leave with our listeners who might be struggling with their own personal challenges?
Trauma is not so much in the brain as it is in the body. The quickest way to access how why you're reacting a certain way. Why am I so nervous about something? Why am I so scared about something? Why am I so angry about something? Take a moment, do an inventory of what your body is feeling, and start to talk to your body, because your body, believe it or not, is trying to communicate something to you. Usually it's a memory. And that was
Mhm.
kind of my first step. So that's my first bit of advice. Start to tune in to your body, and you'll start to understand more and more your behavior.
Beautiful, beautiful. How has sharing your story through this podcast and other podcasts impacted you, and what do you hope it will inspire in other people?
Well, I'm a talker. I love connecting with folks. I'm an educator at heart. So the podcasts for me are just, it gets me back to my original mission way back in the day when I was a teacher, of just being able to show folks that there is this healing modality. So I'm super, super thankful that folks like you are having these platforms that I can share this story, because the ultimate goal is that one of your listeners finds out, hears about this, and at some point decides that this is the treatment for them, and then the ripple effect moves forward. So very grateful to be chatting with wonderful folks like yourself.
Beautiful. No, I appreciate, you being on here, and actually you reaching out to me. I felt so honored. So the final question is, if you could go back and give one piece of advice to your younger self, what would that be and why?
So that's a form of reparenting that I did a lot. I learned that from my therapist, that it is completely okay to use your imagination and put adult Jill to whatever age needs her. And really, I think the big message for all the ages I wound up reparenting was, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay, because I didn't have an adult in my life telling me that as a child. And quite the
Yeah,
opposite. It was doom and gloom. My parents didn't know any better. That's what I would say and that's what I did say very often to that young Jill. It's going to be okay. I promise.
beautiful, beautiful. And where can people find you, Jill?
Yeah, I'm thejourneysage.com. It's all about being the educator of the journey. So I didn't want to say the teacher sage, so I said the journey sage. And the most of what I think, if people are looking for a psychedelic professional, go to the website. If people are looking to understand this therapy more, just head on over to the Journey Sage on YouTube, because that's where I kind of talk about the procedure, intentions. I kind of explain
Mhm.
it all there.
Beautiful. And where can everybody find this book?
That's on Amazon. Rescuing Jill is up on Amazon, and there's a couple of chapters up on my website if you want to get a taste before you commit. It is very much, you're in the sidecar with me as I'm going through the therapy, and Jacqueline, you can attest. Sometimes it was 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Uh,
Yeah,
I'm very
yeah.
honest about how hard that year was.
Yeah, no. And I thank you for sharing your story and writing that book, because it definitely helped me to be on that sidecar with you and be right there with you and feel all of it and just cry. I'm just such a crier. I'm always crying for everything. I've become very empath, very emotional. So for me, hearing stuff like that, it's just like, wow, the courage and the strength that you had to be able to do this work. Thank you. Thank you so much for that, because
You know,
it
I
doesn't go on.
I thank the people with whom I worked because they were, trust me, I was just a player on the field. They were players with me. So thank you.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, audience, for listening to the show. Thank you, Jill, for being here. And again, thank you for being on the Dear Souls podcast. And just stay tuned for the next episodes and stay tuned for this one because this one is like kick bum ass. Just say that.
See everybody.
Bye, guys. Thank you.